Hello, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back to my channel. It's Keisha and Laundry, and today I am sitting in Oak Tree Park, downtown Jacksonville. You know, online you always hear about all the crazy people in Florida, but they never say how beautiful the place is. So I decided to get out the house today, and I was going to do it from Friendship Fountain, but then I decided to come on around here to Oak Tree Park. This tree is over 250 years old. It's said to be the oldest living thing in Jacksonville, which is funny. People have weddings here. So I'm coming back to tell you about me being robbed when I was 8 months pregnant. So it was January 2003, and I was working at a place for like 9 years. It was Indians that owned the building. They spoke Gujarati, a real nice family. So my sister had got a room there, and she was at the desk talking to me at the time. I was working like a 3 to 11 or a 4 to 12 shift. And me and my sister was at the desk talking, and some guy walks in. And he says hi. He said he used to work there, and he started asking for different people. You know how when you used to work at a job, if you like it, you stop back by to see how the people doing, you know, and catch up. So he asked for this specific lady in housekeeping, asked if she still worked there. I was like, oh yeah. So I called downstairs, I paged her up front, and I told her, you know, who was there to see her. So while I was standing there, me and my sister was still talking, and he was making small talk with us, waiting for her to come up off the elevator. That building has 6 floors. In the you know, Pennsylvania, we have basements, so the housekeeping department was on the basement level of the building. So while we was waiting for her to come up, we making small talk with the guy, and he tried to, my sister had my nephew with him my nephew was with my sister at the time. He was about 3 years old, maybe 4. And when the guy went to go say something to my nephew, like, you know, he swerved him, you know, because kids have that sixth sense. And that always stick out in my head. So, I say so a lot, but so. She comes up off the elevator. They see each other, walk over, greet each other. Oh, hey! You know, as soon as when she get off the elevator, she took him downstairs with her for a little while, you know, to catch up. And he came back out after a while. Oh, my Lord. It is Jacksonville, and I am outside. And he leaves out. And at this particular property, at a certain time at night, the lobby go completely dead. It's like no one there. And the crazy thing is that the lady who worked in housekeeping, her husband also had a job there, and he drove the van. So he knew they knew the property well, because they worked there for a long time, just like I did. So they knew the ins and outs, and you know, things like that. So they knew about this specific time that the lobby just go completely dead. For some reason, it just go completely dead at this time every night. And he walks back in at this time of night where the lobby is dead. And you know, since I know him from earlier, I'm like, hey, but I'm a little confused as to why he back. Mind you, I worked the desk. He didn't get a room. He just came to see the lady in housekeeping and leave out. And so I'm like, hey, and he was like, hey. So once again, we making small talk again. And then he says, I'm holding you up. And I was like, what? And he put his hand in his jacket, and he was shaking, and he had this look on his face, and he was like, I'm holding you up. I was like, he had to convince me he was robbing me, because I mean, for one, come on, are you that retard? Are you that slow? So because he was shaking and the look on his face, I knew it was serious. But he still had to convince me, because I was like, yeah, right. And then I'm like, it's a camera right there, you know. And he was like, I'm serious, and I will hurt you. So I opened the drawer, and he leaning over. He had a black hat. It was kind of cold outside at the time, because he had on like a light tan jacket and some brown pants, and a black hat that he had, I guess, for the money. And he was telling me, he told me to put the money in the hat, and he was leaning over looking inside the drawer. And back then, a lot of people paid with checks. So I had, you know, on each section of my drawer, it was, you know, for the 1s, 5s, 10s, 20s, and then I had the checks in the last space of the register drawer. And I used to keep my big bills underneath of the checks, just because that's just what I did, because some desks are too low and people are too able to see. So just as a safety reason for myself, I always did that. So he leaning over, and he, you know, I'm grabbing the money, and I consciously did not grab the checks. because I knew a robber, if he looking, he not gonna say give me the checks too. So he robbed me, he left, and I'm standing there like in shock, like what just happened? The switchboard at the time, back then it was hard for switchboards to dial 911. I don't know why, but you would have a hard time dialing 911, but you fast forward now, you can dial 911 from the switchboards. So I'm having a hard time. I forget that you can't even dial 911 from the switchboard because I've had to do, you know, I've had to do it a few times, but I wasn't even thinking. So I goes out to the payphone. Cell phones wasn't that big back then. At least I didn't have one. So I goes out to the payphone in the lobby and I dial 911, and then that's when it sunk in and I just bust out crying. Mind you, I'm 8 months pregnant and I'm like, I just got robbed. And it was like, I mean, it's not even funny, but it just has sunk in. Like I was so stern until I got to that phone and it came out my mouth of what happened. So the cops responded like really fast. They came over and I was like in the middle of a CSI show. They had the thing, they was fingerprinting, you know, dusting the counter for fingerprints and everything, and they spoke to me, and you know, and I'm like telling them what happened, and I'm like, you know, I told them that he crazy because it's a camera right there. Well, how come the camera wasn't even recording? The cop was like, this camera ain't connected to nothing. It was a dummy camera, y'all. Mind y'all, I worked there for so many years, I had no idea it was a dummy camera, but it was only plugged into the wall. The cord was only plugged into the wall, but you know, to somebody's naked eye, you just think it's a you know, a good recording system. I mean, gosh, it's a hotel camera. But I mean, hotels is the last place you want to rob because we don't have that much money. The guy had got like $150 something. But when I gave the cops the description of the guy, I don't know what the odds are that somebody will be in the area a few blocks up with the same freaking jacket and color pants. So the cops, because they was aware of what happened, I guess they was scoping out the immediate area, and so they came back and they got me because they seen somebody who fit the prescription. They seen somebody who fit the description of the person that had held me up. And so the cop, I get to the back of a cop car, and they had the guy, they drove me over to where the guy was, and they had the guy like he was like leaning against the cop car, on the hood of the cop car, and the cops was shining the lights in his face, so that he was blind to me riding by and trying to identify him. But that wasn't even a guy. I don't know what the odds are that somebody will be in the same neighborhood, but back home it's typical for the guys to wear the same coats and all look the same. You be driving down the street like, is that such and such? No, that's not him. But yeah, it was crazy for him to do that, knowing that you knew the girl. So of course I told the detectives that the guy had stopped in earlier and he knew the housekeeping manager. Well, she takes it all somewhere else, and she like, you know, trying to go around tell people I set the place up. Honey, if I set them up, I would have gave them the money that was under the checks, you know. But nobody knew that, you know. And only her and her husband knew that, well, not only, but the people who work there know that the lobby get dead at around that time. It's just nobody in there. And only if you work there do you know that. So it was just odd for me that the guy stopped by there earlier in that day and then come right back that time of night, you know, to get $152. Are you kidding me? But just because I had told the cops that he knew Mona, well, it's out there now. Well, just because I told the cops that he knew her, she took it as I was saying she set me up or whatever. But, you know, no, I was just telling them so that they can find who did it. And I never had to go to court for that. I don't know why, but I never had to go to court for that or anything because I guess they never found the guy. But I was 8 months pregnant. That happened like the beginning of January 2003, and I had my son February 19, 2003. That's probably why he's so tough. But yeah, that's yet another story, and I'll be back with more. And I'm gonna go to different locations because, like I said, Florida is so beautiful, and all you ever hear about is the crazy people. But I'm gonna let y'all see some of the beauty of Florida, you know, just so it's not all crazy people talk about us down here. Even though I'm not a native, but and I'm sweating like I'm in Willacoochee, Georgia. But yeah, and I want to leave you with this tidbit. One person can defeat an army. I'm living testimony of that. It don't matter how many weapons the people have against you and you have nothing, you can defeat them. Remember that. And as I always say, love, peace, and prosperity.